Have you ever looked at a stranger and felt the ghost of your past staring right back at you? Some secrets refuse to stay buried, no matter how deep you dig the grave. This is a story about a man who lost everything to a devastating lie, only to find the truth hanging around the neck of a terrified young girl. Prepare yourself for a journey that will shatter your heart and piece it back together. Make sure to listen closely, because nothing in this house is exactly as it seems. Dr. Ethan Sterling was a brilliant neurosurgeon in Manhattan, a man whose hands saved lives daily, yet he could not fix the broken pieces of his own home. He lived in a sprawling estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, trapped in a lifeless marriage with Victoria, an ambitious and image-obsessed magazine editor. While Ethan longed for warmth and family, Victoria cared only for her social standing. The true casualty of their toxic dynamic was little Leo, a 5-year-old boy Ethan had adopted after a tragic loss at his hospital. Victoria despised the child, viewing him as an inconvenient accessory. The mansion was a revolving door of exhausted nannies, driven away by the boy's desperate cries for attention and Victoria's cruel demands. But everything was about to change with a single, desperate hiring decision. The heavy oak door of the Greenwich estate swung open, revealing a grand foyer bathed in the cold light of a massive crystal chandelier. Dr. Ethan Sterling stood on the threshold, the collar of his designer trench coat soaked from the relentless October rain. He closed his eyes, inhaling the scent of expensive floor wax and lingering tension. Before he could even set down his medical briefcase, the piercing sound of a child crying echoed down the grand marble hallway. It was followed immediately by the sharp, grating voice of his wife, Victoria. Ethan let out a slow, exhausted breath, feeling the crushing weight of a 14-hour surgical shift pressing down on his shoulders. Every single evening felt like stepping onto a battlefield. He tightened his grip on the leather handle, bracing himself for the inevitable chaos. "When are you going to find a decent nanny for this impossible child?" Victoria screamed from the formal living room. Little Leo, a whirlwind of tears and messy blonde hair, sprinted around the corner. The 5-year-old boy threw his small arms around Ethan's legs, burying his wet face into the damp fabric of his trousers. "Daddy, you are finally home!" Leo sobbed, his voice trembling with genuine distress. "Mommy is yelling at me again. She says I am bad, but I did not mean to do it. She does not love me at all." Ethan knelt on the cold floor, gently stroking the boy's trembling shoulders, his heart aching at the raw pain in his son's voice. Victoria marched into the hallway, her designer heels clicking aggressively against the marble floor. She crossed her arms, her manicured fingers tapping impatiently against her silk blouse. "Do not coddle him, Ethan. Your precious son just drove another nanny out the door. The agency called 30 minutes ago. She quit after just 1 month." Ethan sighed, looking up at his infuriated wife. "What happened this time, Victoria? He is just a little boy with a lot of energy. He needs patience, not constant screaming." Victoria pointed dramatically toward the living room. "He shattered the antique Murano glass vase, the one we bought in Venice. The nanny said she could not keep up with his hyperactive nonsense for another second, and honestly, I do not blame her. You need to discipline him." Leo looked up at his father, his big brown eyes wide with panic. "It was an accident, Daddy, I promise. The nanny never wanted to play with me. She just made me sit at the table and do math flashcards. I asked her to play hide and seek for just 5 minutes. She hid behind the heavy curtains, and when I found her, she jumped out and tripped over the rug. She bumped the table and the vase fell down. It was not my fault she was so clumsy." The boy wiped his nose with his sleeve, sniffing pitifully. Ethan could not help but smile faintly at the innocent explanation. Victoria gasped, her face flushing with anger. "Look at you! You are actually smiling. Instead of punishing him, you find this amusing. You let him walk all over us, Ethan. There is absolutely no control in this house." Ethan stood up slowly, lifting Leo into his arms. The boy rested his head against his father's chest, instantly calming down to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Enough, Victoria. Please stop screaming. I have performed 3 complex spinal surgeries today, and my head is pounding. It is just a glass vase. We can buy another one. The nanny quit, so we will simply find a new one. It is not the end of the world." He kissed the top of Leo's head. "In fact, I think we should handle the interviews differently this time. We will bring the candidates here, and we will let Leo choose. If he picks the nanny he likes, maybe they will actually get along." Victoria stared at him as if he had lost his mind. "Are you completely insane? You want to let a 5-year-old child make hiring decisions for our household? Fine. Do whatever you want. I will call the agency tomorrow, but I refuse to participate in this ridiculous circus." She turned on her heel and stormed up the grand staircase, leaving a trail of expensive perfume in the cold air. Ethan just held his son tighter, grateful for the small moment of peace. Later that evening, the heavy atmosphere in the house finally lifted. Ethan sat on the plush carpet of Leo's bedroom, completely immersed in building a massive Hot Wheels track. The bright orange plastic looped around the bed and under the desk. Ethan laughed as the tiny toy cars crashed into a pile of wooden blocks. In these moments, the renowned surgeon felt like a child again. His soul rested. Leo was the perfect companion, giggling uncontrollably and showing off his newest loops. The boy was bright, energetic, and endlessly curious. Ethan genuinely could not understand why Victoria found him so unbearable. Leo was just a normal, happy kid who needed a little bit of affection, but Victoria treated him like an unwanted guest. After reading 3 bedtime stories, Ethan tucked the heavy quilt around his son. He watched the boy's chest rise and fall in a peaceful rhythm. A deep wave of protective love washed over him. This boy was his entire world. He turned off the bedside lamp, leaving only the soft glow of a nightlight shaped like a rocket ship. As he walked down the quiet hallway toward the master bedroom, the familiar sense of dread returned. He knew what was waiting for him on the other side of that door. A cold bed, a colder wife, and the echoing silence of a marriage that had died years ago. Ethan slipped into the master bedroom. The room was dark, save for the blue light of the television illuminating Victoria's face. She was lying on the far edge of the king-sized bed, scrolling through her phone. Ethan changed into his sleepwear and slid under the covers. Seeking a moment of comfort, he reached out, gently placing his hand on her shoulder. He longed for just a trace of affection, a simple reminder that he was not completely alone. Victoria flinched, violently shrugging his hand away. "Do not touch me, Ethan. I am exhausted from dealing with your little monster all day. I do not know why I ever agreed to let you adopt him. Thank God we do not have biological children, or I would have lost my mind by now." The words cut through the dark room like a physical blade. Ethan pulled his hand back, his jaw clenching with sudden fury. "Never speak about him like that again." Ethan's voice was dangerously low and steady. "I love Leo exactly as if he were my own flesh and blood. I have wanted children my entire life. It is the greatest joy a person can experience. But you are far too selfish to ever understand that." He turned his back to her, staring blankly at the dark wallpaper. The silence between them was suffocating. Sleep would not come. Instead, his mind began to drift backward, pulled into the haunting memories of a life he had left behind long ago. Lying in the dark, the memories of his youth played behind Ethan's eyelids like an old, faded movie. He had grown up in a wealthy family of doctors in Boston, destined from birth to wear a white coat. He attended a prestigious medical school, driven by a genuine desire to heal people. It was during his second year of residency that his entire universe shifted. Her name was Sarah. She was a nursing student from a poor neighborhood, working night shifts in the hospital laboratory just to keep her family afloat. Sarah was quiet, incredibly bright, and possessed a natural beauty that required no effort. Ethan fell hopelessly in love the very first time he saw her organizing blood samples in the sterile lab. He started following her around, offering to carry heavy boxes of supplies, bringing her terrible cafeteria coffee just to see her smile. Slowly they became inseparable. Their love was pure, electric, and deeply innocent. They would sit on the fire escape of her cramped apartment, sharing a single blanket, talking for hours about the lives they would save. Everyone at the hospital knew they were destined for each other. Everyone, except Ethan's parents, who viewed the poor nursing student as a stain on their pristine family legacy. But Ethan did not care. He bought a ring. The wedding was planned for the spring. They had already picked out a small, rustic venue near the water. But fate, disguised as a career opportunity, intervened. Ethan was unexpectedly selected for a highly competitive 3-month surgical fellowship in Chicago. It was the chance of a lifetime, an offer he simply could not refuse. The night before his flight, they stood at the airport gate, unable to let go of each other. The bright fluorescent lights hummed above them as Sarah buried her face in his chest, her tears soaking his shirt. "I will wait for you every single day," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Just promise you will call me. 3 months will go by in a flash." Ethan kissed her forehead, his heart breaking at the thought of leaving her behind. "I promise, my love. The moment I get back, we are getting married. Nothing will ever keep us apart." He boarded the plane, completely unaware that it was the last time he would see her smile. For the first few weeks in Chicago, they spoke every night. But then, abruptly, the calls stopped. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her letters ceased. Panic set in. Ethan begged his parents in Boston to check on her, to find out what had happened. They promised to look into it, but days turned into agonizing weeks of silence. When the fellowship finally ended, Ethan rushed back to Boston, his heart pounding with an unnatural dread. He threw open the doors of his family home, demanding to know where Sarah was. His father sat him down in the grand study, pouring a glass of whiskey with trembling hands. "Son, there is no easy way to say this," his father had said, refusing to meet his eyes. "Sarah was in a terrible car accident on the highway. She did not make it. The funeral was held in her hometown last week." The glass slipped from Ethan's hand, shattering against the hardwood floor. The sound echoed in his ears, mirroring the violent destruction of his own soul. He fell to his knees, struggling to breathe, as a primal scream tore from his throat. He wanted to find her grave, to see it for himself, but his parents blocked his every attempt. "Do not torture yourself, Ethan. She is gone. You do not even know where her family plot is. You have to focus on your medical career." It is what she would have wanted. Broken and entirely consumed by grief, Ethan surrendered. He buried his heart along with her memory. He threw himself entirely into his work, becoming one of the most sought-after surgeons in the country. But the ghost of Sarah followed him in the shadows of every hospital corridor. Years melted away into a blur of sterile operating rooms and meaningless awards. Nearing 40, Ethan was wealthy, respected, and completely hollow inside. His parents had passed away, leaving him a massive fortune, but he remained utterly alone. There were brief romances, but no woman could ever replace the quiet nursing student with the bright smile. Then, 5 years ago, at a high-profile medical charity gala, he met Victoria. She was a fierce, ambitious journalist looking for a scoop on new surgical technologies. She cornered him by the champagne tower, relentless and charming. A few weeks later, she showed up at his apartment, claiming she needed help translating medical jargon for an article. They drank an entire bottle of expensive red wine, laughing at terrible hospital jokes. The next morning, Ethan woke up beside her, entirely overwhelmed by guilt. He expected her to leave, but Victoria simply laughed, wrapped the silk sheets around herself, and declared they were officially a couple. She saw a wealthy, handsome surgeon. He saw a woman who demanded nothing of his broken heart. They married quickly in a lifeless ceremony. It was a partnership of convenience. She enjoyed the prestige and the limitless credit cards. He enjoyed the illusion of not being alone in a massive, echoing house. The turning point in Ethan's life came on a freezing morning in the hospital's maternity ward. A young woman had been rushed in with catastrophic complications. Despite the frantic efforts of the surgical team, she passed away on the operating table. She left behind a tiny, fragile baby boy, born weeks too early. There was no father listed, no emergency contacts. The nurses whispered that the child would be sent to the state foster system by the end of the week. Ethan, who rarely stepped foot in the neonatal unit, felt an inexplicable pull. He walked into the warm, dimly lit room and stood over the plastic incubator. The baby was incredibly small, a tangle of tubes keeping his fragile lungs working. As Ethan reached his sterilized hand through the porthole, the baby's tiny fingers instinctively curled around his index finger. The grip was shockingly strong. The exhausted night nurse sighed softly. "He is a fighter, doctor." "But it breaks my heart knowing he has nobody waiting for him out there." In that exact second, looking at the boy's struggling chest, Ethan made a decision that defied all logic. He would not let this child vanish into a broken system. He went straight to the hospital administrators and began the adoption process. He named the boy Leo. When Ethan brought the adoption papers home, Victoria erupted into a screaming match that shook the mansion's walls. "I am not a mother, Ethan. I have no desire to ruin my body or my career for a child, let alone a random orphan," she shrieked, throwing a crystal glass into the fireplace. But Ethan stood firm. It was the only time he had ever given her an ultimatum. "I am adopting him, with or without you. If you want to remain in this house, you will accept it." Victoria, calculating the loss of her luxurious lifestyle, quickly surrendered. "Fine," she hissed, "but we are hiring a full-time nanny. Do not expect me to change diapers or sacrifice my networking events." And so, Leo became a sterling. Ethan gave the boy his last name and poured every ounce of his dormant love into the child. But as Leo grew from a fragile infant into an energetic toddler, the cracks in the household became impossible to ignore. Victoria was an ice queen. She only held Leo when wealthy guests were visiting, posing for the perfect family picture. The moment the door closed, she would hand him back to the staff. They went through nannies like paper towels. The strict ones frightened Leo, and the young ones were terrified of Victoria. That was the grim reality until the rainy Saturday morning of the new interviews. Saturday arrived with grey clouds and a steady drizzle. Ethan sat behind the heavy mahogany desk in his home office, a stack of resumes resting in front of him. Leo sat on the Persian rug, quietly building a massive castle out of colourful plastic blocks. Victoria sat in the corner on a leather armchair, drinking espresso and watching the scene with a mocking smirk. "Let us see how your brilliant child psychology experiment plays out," she sneered. The first candidate was ushered in. She was a stern woman in her 50s, holding a clipboard and wearing wire-rimmed glasses. She boasted about speaking 4 languages and her strict disciplinary methods. "I believe children must be seen and not heard, Doctor," she announced proudly. Ethan sighed. "Our situation is different. Leo needs a friend, not a drill sergeant. Please, try to interact with him." The woman stepped toward the boy, her shadow falling over his toys. "Stand up, young man, and introduce yourself," she commanded sharply. Leo let out a terrified squeak, abandoned his castle, and scrambled under Ethan's heavy oak desk, wrapping his arms around his father's ankles. "I think we are done here," Ethan said gently, dismissing the strict woman. Victoria rolled her eyes. The second candidate was too busy texting to even notice Leo. By noon, Ethan was ready to give up. Just as Ethan was about to cancel the rest of the appointments, the heavy office door creaked open. A young woman stepped inside, looking slightly nervous. She wore a simple yellow raincoat and had a warm, open face with bright blue eyes. She didn't look much older than 20. Ethan glanced at her sparse resume. Her name was Chloe. She had no formal agency training, only experience babysitting in her neighbourhood. "I am probably wasting my time," Ethan thought. But Chloe didn't march up to the desk. Instead, she immediately noticed Leo peeking out from under the wooden panels. She slowly crouched down onto the rug, ignoring her damp coat, and picked up a red plastic block. "That is a very tall tower," Chloe said softly, her voice melodic and calm. "Do you think it needs a drawbridge? Every good castle needs a drawbridge to keep the dragons out." Leo blinked, slowly uncurling himself from Ethan's legs. He cautiously crawled toward her and handed her a blue piece. "I don't have a dragon," Leo whispered. Chloe smiled brilliantly. That is okay. I can be the dragon. Roar! Leo burst into a fit of giggles, completely enchanted. Within 5 minutes, they were deeply engaged in a complex imaginary battle. Leo looked up at Ethan, his eyes shining. Daddy, she is the one. I want Chloe to stay forever. I promise I will be good. Ethan felt a massive wave of relief wash over him. He watched the young girl carefully, noting how naturally she interacted with the boy. There was no forced enthusiasm, just genuine kindness. All right, Chloe, Ethan said, standing up and grabbing a contract from his drawer. If Leo is happy, I am happy. Let's get the paperwork signed. You can start on Monday morning. Chloe stood up, her face glowing with gratitude. Thank you so much, Dr. Sterling. You have no idea what this job means to me. I promise I won't let you down. She walked toward the desk, unzipping her yellow raincoat as she moved. The heavy fabric parted, revealing a simple silver chain resting against her collarbone. Ethan extended his pen toward her, but his hand froze in mid-air. The blood drained entirely from his face. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Hanging from the delicate chain was a small, uniquely carved silver pendant in the shape of a diving swallow. It had a tiny, flawed sapphire embedded in the wing. Ethan's heart began to hammer violently against his ribs, a deafening drumbeat in his ears. He started gripping the edge of the desk so tightly his knuckles turned white. It was impossible. It had to be a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But it was not. He recognized every scratch, every imperfect curve. The silver swallow. He had designed it himself, 20 years ago, in a small silversmith shop in Boston. He had paid for it with 3 months of his meagre resident salary. He had clasped it around Sarah's neck on the night before he left for Chicago. It was a custom piece. There was not another one like it in the entire world. The room began to spin. Ethan reached up, pulling his reading glasses off with shaking hands, rubbing his eyes aggressively. Chloe noticed his sudden pale complexion and stepped back looking alarmed. Dr. Sterling, are you all right? Did I do something wrong? She asked, her voice trembling. Victoria, who had been silently watching from the corner, narrowed her eyes like a hawk spotting prey. She noticed the intense, breathless way Ethan was staring at the young girl's chest. What is the matter, Ethan? Victoria drawled, her voice dripping with poison. Are you having a heart attack, or are you just overwhelmed by the scenery? Ethan snapped out of his paralysis, forcing a ragged breath into his lungs. No, I am fine, he choked out, sitting down heavily in his leather chair. Just a sudden migraine, the fluorescent lights. Chloe, please sign the last page. We will see you on Monday at 8. As the girl happily signed the papers and left the room, Ethan felt like he was drowning. How could this stranger have Sarah's necklace? The moment the front door clicked shut behind Chloe, Victoria exploded. She tossed her empty espresso cup onto the desk, the ceramic clattering loudly. What on earth was that display, Ethan? The first nanny was a certified professional who could have taught Leo French. You rejected her for this uneducated child. And why were you staring at her like you had just seen a ghost? Are you attracted to her? Is that it? You want some helpless little college girl walking around our house? Ethan rubbed his throbbing temples, struggling to process the impossible collision of his past and present. Do not be ridiculous, Victoria. She is great with Leo. You saw it yourself. He was calm and happy. That is all that matters. He stood up, avoiding her piercing gaze. I really do have a terrible headache. I'm going to lie down. But Victoria was not a fool. She recognized the look of a man hiding a massive secret. She crossed her arms, her manicured nails digging into her own skin. She hated the new nanny already. She despised the youth and warmth radiating from the girl, things Victoria knew she lacked. More importantly, she despised how Ethan had looked at her. A dark, ugly seed of jealousy took root in her chest. She vowed to watch the girl's every move. If this little peasant thought she could waltz into a mansion and steal her husband's attention, she was gravely mistaken. For the next 3 months, Chloe proved to be an absolute godsend. The atmosphere in the massive Greenwich estate shifted dramatically. For the first time in his life, little Leo stopped throwing tantrums. Chloe did not act like a strict governess. She acted like an older sister. If Leo refused to eat his vegetables, she turned the broccoli into tiny trees that needed to be eaten by a dinosaur. If he resisted bedtime, they built elaborate forts out of expensive silk blankets. When Ethan came home from the hospital, he was no longer greeted by screams and chaos. Instead, he would find Leo and Chloe in the backyard, racing across the manicured lawn, laughing until they were breathless. Ethan would stand by the window watching them in absolute awe. But underneath his relief, a burning obsession consumed him. Every time he looked at Chloe, he searched for fragments of Sarah. He noticed the way Chloe tucked her blonde hair behind her left ear when she laughed. It was the exact same motion Sarah used to make. He noticed her bright, intelligent blue eyes. The mathematical impossibility of the situation tormented him nightly. Was it possible? When Sarah died in that car crash, could she have left behind a child? Was Chloe his biological daughter? The timeline fit perfectly. The thought kept him awake, pacing the hardwood floors until dawn. While Ethan was paralyzed by hope and confusion, Victoria was descending into pure paranoia. Her jealousy had mutated into a toxic obsession. Every time she walked into a room and saw Ethan smiling at something Chloe said, Victoria felt a physical stab of rage. She convinced herself that the young girl was a calculating gold digger, manipulating the child to get to the wealthy surgeon. Victoria began going out of her way to make Chloe's life miserable. She would purposefully spill red wine on the carpets and demand Chloe clean it on her hands and knees. She would assign impossible chores that had nothing to do with childcare. But Chloe absorbed the abuse with terrifying grace. She never snapped back, never complained, and always remained politely distant. This only infuriated Victoria more. The girl was too perfect. Victoria realized she could not just fire her without a reason. Ethan would never allow it. She needed something undeniable. She needed a crime. A wicked plan began to form in the dark corners of Victoria's mind. She would create a scenario so damning, so completely unforgivable, that Ethan would have no choice but to throw the girl out into the street. She waited patiently for the perfect afternoon to execute her trap. Ethan could no longer bear the suffocating weight of the unknown. He needed absolute proof. He had to know if Chloe was his daughter. Asking her directly about the silver pendant felt too dangerous. It might scare her away. So he resorted to stealth. One rainy Tuesday, while Chloe was downstairs preparing lunch for Leo, Ethan slipped quietly into the playroom. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. On the small wooden table lay Chloe's pink plastic hairbrush. Ethan's hands shook as he carefully extracted 3 long, blonde hairs from the bristles, ensuring the root follicles were still attached. He placed them carefully inside a sterile plastic bag from his medical kit. Just as he was sealing the bag, a floorboard creaked loudly behind him. Ethan spun around to see Victoria standing in the doorway. Her eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. She looked at the hairbrush, then at the plastic bag in his hand. Ethan quickly shoved the bag into his suit pocket, forcing a casual smile. "She left a mess on the table." "Just tidying up," he lied smoothly. Victoria did not say a single word. She just stared at him with a look of pure, unadulterated venom, then turned and walked away. The next morning, Ethan sent the sample to an independent DNA lab under a false name, paying extra for expedited results. The waiting was sheer agony. 3 days later, the email arrived from the laboratory while Ethan was sitting in his hospital office. His finger hovered over the mouse, trembling. He clicked open the PDF file. The bold black letters glared back at him from the screen. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. The breath rushed out of his lungs in a sharp gasp. He dropped his head into his hands, rubbing his face furiously. She was not his daughter. He felt a bizarre mixture of crushing disappointment and profound confusion. If Chloe was not his child, and she was not Sarah's child, how in God's name did she possess that custom pendant? Did she buy it at a pawn shop? Did she find it? The mystery had only deepened, twisting into a painful knot in his stomach. He resolved that he would sit her down that very evening and gently ask her about the jewellery, no matter how awkward it might be. He had to know the truth before he lost his mind. But as Ethan drove back to his Greenwich estate that afternoon, the dark clouds gathering over the horizon were nothing compared to the storm waiting inside his house. Victoria had decided she was done waiting. The trap was set, the bait was placed, and the jaws were ready to snap shut. Ethan had barely unlocked the massive front door when the deafening sound of a woman screaming echoed from the upper floor. It was Victoria, and she sounded utterly hysterical. "Ethan, get up here right now! Call the police!" she shrieked. Ethan dropped his briefcase, his medical instincts kicking in as he took the stairs 2 at a time. He burst into the master bedroom. Victoria was standing by her vanity mirror, throwing expensive makeup brushes onto the floor, her face flushed red with fake panic. "My grandmother's diamond earrings! They are gone!" she screamed, pointing to an empty velvet box. "The ones worth $50,000. I left them right here this morning." Ethan frowned, looking at the chaotic room. "Victoria, calm down. Nobody has broken into the house. The alarm system is active. You probably just misplaced them. Let us look carefully." Suddenly, Chloe appeared in the doorway, holding little Leo's hand. She looked pale and terrified by the screaming. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Sterling?" Chloe asked gently. Victoria whipped her head around, pointing an accusing, manicured finger straight at the young girl's face. You dirty little thief! You stole them, didn't you? I knew you were nothing but gutter trash trying to rob us blind." Chloe gasped, taking a step backward, as if she had been physically struck. "What? No! I swear I have not even been upstairs today. I was in the kitchen with Leo all morning," she pleaded, tears immediately welling up in her blue eyes. Ethan stepped between them, raising his hands. "Victoria, stop this right now. You cannot just accuse her without proof. This is insane." But Victoria was relentless. She marched across the room, moving with predatory speed, and snatched Chloe's worn canvas tote bag from her shoulder. "If you are innocent, you will not mind if I look," Victoria yelled. She unzipped the bag and aggressively dumped the entire contents onto the hallway carpet. Books, pens, an umbrella, and a small makeup bag scattered across the floor. And there, tumbling out from the folds of a borrowed sweater, was a small sparkling plastic bag containing the heavy diamond earrings. The hallway went dead silent. The glittering stones caught the light of the chandelier, mocking Ethan's disbelief. Chloe dropped to her knees, sobbing hysterically. "I did not take them. I promise you, Dr. Sterling. I do not know how they got in my bag. Someone put them there. Please, you have to believe me." She looked up at Ethan, her face a mask of absolute desperation. Ethan stared at the diamonds on the carpet, his mind completely paralysed. Everything in his heart told him that Chloe was pure, that she would never steal. But the evidence was right there, undeniable and damning. He looked at Victoria, who was wearing a terrifying mask of triumphant outrage. "Look at this, Ethan!" Victoria yelled, kicking the tote bag. "You let a criminal into our home. You let her around our son. Call the cops right now and have her arrested." Ethan looked down at the sobbing girl. His voice cracked as he finally spoke. "Victoria, I am not calling the police to ruin a young girl's life over jewellery. But Chloe, you have to leave. Pack your things and get out of this house immediately." Chloe stopped crying. The betrayal in her eyes was devastating. She looked at Ethan, slowly shaking her head, realising she had no ally in this mansion. Without another word, she scrambled to her feet, grabbed her empty bag and ran down the grand staircase. The heavy front door slammed shut behind her, rattling the glass panes. Ethan stood perfectly still, listening to the silence that followed. He felt physically sick. Victoria crossed her arms, a smug, victorious smile playing on her lips. The threat was eliminated. The house was hers again. That night, the mansion felt like a graveyard. Victoria had gone out to celebrate her victory with friends, leaving Ethan alone in the sprawling, quiet house. He sat on the edge of Leo's bed staring blankly at the wall. The boy had refused to eat dinner. He was curled into a tight ball under his blankets, refusing to look at his father. "Leo, buddy, please talk to me," Ethan whispered, gently rubbing the boy's back. "I know you miss Chloe, but what happened today was very serious." Suddenly, Leo threw the blankets off. His face was blotchy and red from hours of silent crying. In his small hands, he held a piece of drawing paper. He shoved it into Ethan's chest. "You are bad. You are a bad daddy," Leo shouted, his voice cracking with heartbreak. Ethan unfolded the paper. It was a crude crayon drawing. It showed a monster with yellow hair, holding a shiny box, secretly dropping it into another girl's bag. Ethan's blood ran ice cold. "Leo, what is this?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. The boy wiped his nose angrily. "Mommy is the monster. I was hiding under the bed playing with my cars. I saw Mommy put the shiny rocks in Chloe's bag while Chloe was making me a sandwich. Mommy is a liar. She made Chloe cry and you let her do it. You didn't protect her." The realization hit Ethan with the force of a freight train. The sheer, calculated malice of Victoria's trap was breathtaking. She had framed an innocent girl simply out of jealousy. The guilt of letting Chloe walk out that door crashed over him, making it hard to breathe. He pulled Leo into a fierce hug, burying his face in his son's hair. "I am so sorry, Leo. You are right. I was blind, and I was wrong. I promise you, I will fix this. I will make it right." Ethan stayed by the boy's side until he finally fell into an exhausted sleep. Then Ethan walked slowly down the hall to the master bedroom. He did not turn on the lights. He simply sat in the leather chair in the corner, waiting in the darkness. Hours later, the bedroom door opened. Victoria stumbled in, smelling of expensive champagne and victory. She flipped the light switch and shrieked when she saw Ethan sitting there, his eyes burning with a terrifying cold fury. "Jesus, Ethan! You scared me to death," she snapped, tossing her purse onto the bed. Ethan stood up slowly. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. His voice was deathly quiet, which made it infinitely more terrifying. "I know what you did, Victoria. Leo was under the bed. He saw you plant the earrings in Chloe's bag." Victoria froze. The colour drained from her perfectly powdered face, but only for a second. She quickly recovered, her features twisting into a mask of ugly defiance. "So what if I did?" she spat, crossing her arms. "That little tramp was a menace. You were staring at her like a lovesick teenager. I did what I had to do to protect my marriage and my home. You should be thanking me." Ethan stared at the woman he had lived with for 5 years, realizing he was looking at an absolute stranger, a monster dressed in designer clothing. "Your marriage," Ethan echoed bitterly. "We never had a marriage, Victoria. We had an arrangement. And my home? You despise this house. You despise my son. And you despise me. We are done. I want you out of this house by tomorrow morning. I am filing for divorce." Victoria let out a harsh, barking laugh. "You are throwing me out over a teenage babysitter and a child that isn't even yours. Fine. Keep your pathetic little life, Ethan. I am young, I am beautiful, and I'm sick to death of pretending to be a mother to that stray dog you brought home. I deserve a life of luxury, not wiping up spilled juice." She grabbed a suitcase and began aggressively throwing dresses into it. The marriage ended exactly as it began, cold, calculated, and completely devoid of love. The next morning, the house was finally cleansed of Victoria's toxic presence. Ethan hired a temporary agency to clean the house from top to bottom, wanting to erase her completely. But his primary mission was finding Chloe. He needed to apologize, to beg for her forgiveness, and to finally get the answer about the silver pendant. He drove straight to the staffing agency that had originally sent her profile. The manager, a stern-looking woman, initially refused to release Chloe's personal address. "Your wife called yesterday and demanded we blacklist the girl for theft, Dr. Sterling. I cannot allow you to harass her further." Ethan slammed his hands on the desk, his eyes pleading. My wife lied. She planted the jewellery. We are getting a divorce. Chloe is completely innocent, and she's the best thing that ever happened to my son. I need to apologise to her face to face. Please, you have to help me make this right. Seeing the raw, desperate sincerity in the famous surgeon's eyes, the manager sighed and scribbled an address on a yellow sticky note. Ethan took the paper, his heart pounding. The address was in a run-down, neglected neighbourhood deep in Brooklyn, far away from the manicured lawns of his world. The drive to Brooklyn felt like an eternity. The rain had started again, washing the grime of the city streets. Ethan parked his luxury sedan in front of a crumbling brick apartment building. The fire escape was rusted, and the front door hung off its hinges. He walked up 4 flights of dimly lit, foul-smelling stairs, holding a massive bouquet of roses. He stood before apartment 4B, took a deep breath, and knocked gently. A minute passed. Then the heavy deadbolt clicked, and the door opened a few inches. Chloe peeked out. When she saw Ethan, her face went ghost white. She immediately tried to slam the door, but Ethan held up his hands gently. Chloe, please wait. I know everything. I know Victoria framed you. Leo saw her do it. I kicked her out of the house. We are getting a divorce. I am so unbelievably sorry for what I put you through. Please, just let me apologise. Chloe stopped pushing against the door. She looked at his tired, desperate eyes and slowly opened it. She stepped out into the hallway, pulling the door almost completely shut behind her. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. You believe me, she whispered, her voice breaking. Ethan nodded vigorously. With all my heart, and Leo misses you terribly. Please come back to us. Chloe let out a long, shaky breath, burying her face in her hands. Thank God! You have no idea how much I cried. I loved Leo so much. I didn't want to lose him. Ethan smiled softly, handing her the roses. You haven't lost him. But Chloe, before anything else, I have to ask you a question. It has been driving me insane for months. Please do not be frightened. He pointed carefully at her chest. The silver bird pendant you wear. Where did you get it? It is incredibly important. Chloe looked down at the necklace, her fingers gently touching the silver wing. Oh, this? My Aunt Sarah gave it to me. I am an orphan. My aunt raised me since I was 15. She is the kindest person in the world. But she is very sick, Dr. Sterling. She fell on the ice last winter and crushed her lower spine. We could not afford the surgery. Now she is completely bedridden in agony. The doctors say it is too late. She gave me this necklace a few weeks ago, telling me to keep it after she dies. She said a boy who truly loved her gave it to her 20 years ago. Ethan's medical briefcase slipped from his hand, crashing onto the dirty hallway floor. The world tilted violently on its axis. He couldn't breathe. Sarah! Your aunt is Sarah? From Boston? He choked out, tears instantly filling his eyes. Chloe stepped back, startled by his intense reaction. Yes! How did you know that? Ethan didn't answer. He pushed past her, stepping into the cramped, dark apartment. The air was thick with the heavy, sour smell of cheap painkillers and damp walls. He walked toward the only bedroom like a man in a trance. He pushed the cracked wooden door open. The room was illuminated only by a street lamp shining through a dirty window. On a small, sagging bed lay a woman. She was terrifyingly frail, her face pale and drawn, tight with chronic pain. Her blonde hair, now streaked with silver, was spread across a thin pillow, but beneath the lines of suffering, Ethan saw the exact same face that had haunted his dreams for 2 decades. It was Sarah. She was alive. She groaned, shifting painfully, and slowly opened her eyes, squinting at the large silhouette in the doorway. Ethan fell to his knees beside the bed, tears streaming freely down his cheeks. He reached out, his trembling hands gently taking her thin, cold fingers. Sarah! My God, Sarah, it's me! He sobbed, pressing her hand to his lips. It is Ethan. I found you. They told me you were dead. Sarah stared at him, her eyes widening in pure shock. A frail, shaking hand reached out, touching his cheek to make sure he was not a ghost. The truth finally poured out in the dark room. 20 years ago, Ethan's wealthy father had visited Sarah in Chicago, threatening to destroy her family's lives, revealing a false criminal record he had fabricated to ruin her mother. Terrified, pregnant, and desperate, Sarah fled to a monastery, where she tragically lost Ethan's baby due to the stress. She hid for decades, believing she was protecting the man she loved. But Ethan was a surgeon now, a man with the power to heal. Within hours, he transferred Sarah to his hospital. He personally led a grueling 6-hour spinal surgery, meticulously repairing the damaged nerves. Against all odds, Sarah walked again. They rebuilt their shattered lives, moving Sarah and Chloe into the Greenwich estate. Leo finally had the loving mother and sister he deserved. A year later, a bankrupt and bitter Victoria appeared at their gates, threatening to tell Leo he was adopted if they didn't pay her off. But Leo, holding Sarah's hand, looked Victoria in the eye and said, "I know I am adopted, but they are my real family. You are nothing." Defeated, Victoria vanished into the rain, and in a final beautiful twist of fate, Sarah, at the age of 42, discovered she was pregnant, replacing the child they had lost so long ago. True love, no matter how buried, always finds its way back to the light. What would you do if the love of your life suddenly returned from the dead? Let us know in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone you love.